donk, donk, donk. Straight wheel. Bang, 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 donk, 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 bang, bang, bang. Okay guys, we just pulled this assembly out of the freezer. We want this bearing right here to be as small as possible, so we put it in the freezer. A lot of two-stroke dirt bikes use Yama Bond in the center to do the gasket. This one from Suzuki actually has a gasket, so looks like I got to do some shenanigans here to get around that rod. Go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and tear this off right here. Just give that rod a place to live. We'll get it all bolted down tight and torqued, and then we'll shave it with a razor blade to make it good. Alright, so we got our gaskets finding home all the way around. It's in a good spot. Alright, this next part's going to be hard because it's going to be hot. It's going to be hot coming out of that oven. So I got the engine balanced in this Home Depot bucket pretty good. Let me let me get a couple rags and try to just handle this deal. No sense being timid about it, right? We got to just get her done. Alright, praise God, let's just do it. Didn't slide on by hand. See if we can tap her down. Alright, it's fighting me. It's fighting me, guys. I'm going to have to put bolts in there and pull this up and torque it. I'll be back. A couple different bolts in different places around the engine. I'm just going to go walk them in. Hear that creaking and cracking? That's the bearing relieving as I torque it up. That's everything finding seat, finding home. I know it sounds awful. It's kind of like working on Honda sport bike plastic. It sounds like it's going to break at any minute. But that's just the bearing working its way into the case. Hear it? Pow, pow, pow. You just kind of work each bolt a little bit. You go around. Keep everything level. You don't really want to tighten anything. Like that one just got a little bit tight. You want to leave it loose. You want that gasket to be able to flex and float in there until you have time to get all your bolts in. Alright, so now that I got it pulled up tight, no bearings can fall out or get out of place. This side's still real hot. I'm gonna I got to do it quick because it's hot, but I'm going to flip this thing and then get to where I can put all the bolts in. Okay, here we go. Now, another good idea too is pull the bolts back out in case you had the wrong lengths. You don't want to be forcing a bolt longer than you need down into a case. It's not good for it. Okay, now I know this one goes here because it's got the hose holder on it. So I know that one goes there. See that height as it sticks up? Get an approximation of what kind of height you're dealing with there. You want to work around the engine when you put these case bolts in. You want to maintain about that amount of height. If you put a bolt in and it's too long, well, I've been guessing pretty good here. I'm trying to find one that's off. Oh, here's one. Let's put this real long one here. If it looks, well, that even don't look bad. That's where it goes. Watch this. Okay. See how tall that one is right now? That's wrong. If you got one sticking out like that, it's wrong. And if you got one consequently that's so short it's all the way up against a case like that, that's wrong. So you want it to look like that, like that, like that, like that, like that, like that. Don't miss that little doodaddy in there. You want all these bolts. See how that's a little long? That's long. So you want a little bit shorter one. Oh, that still looks a little long. Here we go. Let's try this one. There we go. See that? It's the right length. That's the right length. Then we got two down inside the case. That's it. They're all in place. They're all the right height above the case. They're all doing good. I should have probably put the shift shaft seal and the counter shaft seal in, but that's no big deal. I can take sockets and push them in. I mean, you probably want to put them in before you put the cases back together, but it's not necessary. This will work just fine. I put the seal in here off camera for this clutch actuator arm. Alright, that's it. I'm going to torque all these bolts down. And that's the left and right cases put together with the transmission and the crank. It spins nice and free. There we go. Hear that? I'm getting creaks as I torque this case all the way down. I got all the bolts in. You want to start all your bolts and make sure the gasket's lined up. I've started half the bolts before, got the cases squeezed together, and then not been able to move the gasket and get the other bolts in. So you want to get all your bolts in and started before you go back torquing any of them. Leave them all loose until they're all started. Hear that cracking? That's the case and the bearings and the crank all coming together and squeezing up. The crank bearings are finishing finding their way home on the crank itself, and the crank bearings and the crank are finishing finding their way up in the cases, and it's all getting mashed together. And you know, as long as it still spins freely, you know. Oh, that actually did start locking it down a little bit. It got a little bit tight. It's probably because it's side loading the bearing. Yeah, crank's a little bit tight to spin. It's probably because it's side loading, but yeah, we'll torque it all up. Here's what we'll do: we'll torque it all up. I'll throw the whole thing in the oven, then I'll pull it out and throw the whole thing in the freezer. That'll solve the problem because all the metal will expand and all the metal will contract it'll find home. So yeah, right now that crank bearing and crank's just a little bit bound up because probably wasn't perfectly evenly pressed together. So I'll torque all these bolts down, go ahead and put a good squeeze on it, and then maybe what we'll do is get a wedge in there and tap the inside of that crank in the halves right there with a wedge, you know, something like that, you know. We'll torque all the bolts down, and then I'll tap this down in there like that, and we'll see if that loosens it up. As I put this primary gear on and impacted it on with this super killer gun you guys probably don't have at home. This is not an $80 Home Depot half-inch drive gun. This is a $500 Matco 18-volt half-inch gun. I've purposely used this to break studs out of cars with it. So it's got some serious power. I didn't go full power, obviously, but I just hit this hard enough to go up to, I don't know, 75, 80 pounds. Hit it good and hard, and by impacting it on, it shook everything. It shook the bearings, it shook the crank, shook the rod, shook the cases, and it freed everything up, you know, where the bearings and stuff were in there tight. So the seals are dragging on the crank, and it'll start and run just fine, and it'll warm up, and everything will find a final home one last time as it heat cycles.